Richard is a 30-year-old Venezuelan father of 4 and living in fear.
Yes, I'm afraid. I didn't even want to go outside of where I'm staying so as not to mention my exact address. I haven't had any work. I haven't gone.
Scripps News is not showing his face or giving his last name to protect his identity as he fears retaliation from the people who claimed that they were going to help him. Along with thousands of other Venezuelans, Richard and his family arrived in El Paso, Texas more than a month ago through Mexico, seeking asylum from an oppressive regime as well as safety and opportunity in the United States. U.S. immigration authorities granted him and his family humanitarian parole into the country as he awaits his asylum plea.
And she offers me to go to California. They say they're going to help me change my immigration appointment for the immigration process.
In June, 36 other migrants were flown to Sacramento, and the California Attorney General said those he spoke with told him they were promised work that never materialized. Richard says he heard the same deal. He told us 2 women and a man promised jobs and free shelter and that they'd arrange for a new asylum court date for him. All he had to do was accept a free trip to California.
They told me they'd call around 5 p.m. to take us to the hotel.
Richard said one of the people who led the effort was a Puerto Rican woman named Miranda, shown in this picture. It was provided to Scripps News by another migrant who accepted the flight to California. In all, Scripps News spoke with 6 migrants who identified the woman as Miranda and said she approached them with similar promises. Richard says the people who approached him carried wads of cash and bought his family luggage at nearby shops. He says Miranda and her associates drove him and his family to this motel in Las Cruces, New Mexico. This is video Richard tells us he recorded of the arrival. The motel's owner-operator told us over that weekend a large block of rooms was booked for roughly 3 dozen migrants. The state of Florida took credit for chartering planes to fly migrants, mostly Venezuelan and Colombian, to Catholic services in Sacramento on June 2nd and June 5th, providing this video as evidence the trip was consensual. Florida says it uses 3 contractors, ARS Global Emergency Management, Gardaworld Federal Services, and Vertal Systems in what it calls its unauthorized alien transport program, for which lawmakers have so far authorized $12 million. ARS Global, which is headquartered north of Houston, did acknowledge it has a contract more broadly with Florida and says it carries out services with compassion and expediency. But when Scripps News reached out to these companies, none of them confirmed or denied any involvement with the operation of these particular flights or the recruiting activity that brought the migrants we spoke to California. Scripps News could not confirm whether Miranda or her associates were working for any of these contractors.
But if there's a policy to have an open border, then I think the sanctuary jurisdiction should be the ones that have to bear that.
DeSantis claims the migrants consented to the trips and knowingly signed these waivers. Richard tells a different story.
Only in English.
Solo en inglés.
Sí, señor. Yes, sir. Nothing in Spanish. English only. I didn't understand anything I was going to sign. I mean, how will I sign something I'm not understanding?
He told us he and others were coerced to sign consent forms they could not understand.
I studied tax law and finance in my country.
This Venezuelan man, who also did not want to be identified, fearing for his safety, said he was given the same promises and asked to sign a form written only in English. He ultimately opted not to sign.
If I don't have a lawyer, I'm not going to sign a paper when I can't speak English.
Scripps News obtained fuel receipts for this twin-propeller aircraft and flight records confirming trips from Deming, New Mexico to Sacramento in June. We reached out to the company listed on the receipt. Representatives declined to comment. At the motel where Miranda and her associates put up the migrants before the flight, Richard says he grew suspicious of their motives.
1 hour later, the lady calls me and says, "Please do not leave the hotel. You will stay there until Wednesday, and I will pay you every day if possible until Saturday."
He adds Miranda also discouraged him from leaving even when he insisted. He then got a text message which deepened his fears.
Yes, they arrive in California at 2:30. 3 hours later, they call me and tell me not to come, that this is a fraud.
A fellow migrant who accepted the June 2nd flight to Sacramento told him that the promises made were not kept, and he should back out, saying they were dumped, and she didn't know why, and also to tell people not to let them take advantage of you. On June 2nd, that group ended up on the Catholic Diocese of Sacramento's doorstep. The diocese told Scripps News it received 0 notice from the state of Florida that migrants would arrive. Richard says he begged to be returned to El Paso. A driver hired to help transport Richard's group agreed to take Richard and his family back.
¿Cuándo cambiaste tu mente sobre el viaje?
On the second day, when I saw things didn't add up, When I saw those things, when I saw the cash, and when I saw that in front of me, they never spoke in Spanish, never, always English with codes. They asked me for my children's pictures. No organization is going to do that, not a humanitarian organization.
And for migrants like Richard, aid workers say they are vulnerable.
It's really concerning because you have people that are already traumatized, people that have been on this long journey to try and get to the U.S., and then they arrive and they're met with false promises and false information about what their future looks like. And unfortunately, this is a pattern that's repeating itself.
The congresswoman who represents El Paso tells Scripps News there should be a criminal investigation.
We know, in fact, that Texas law enforcement has identified this as unlawful behavior. We know that the state of California is also looking into it, but I do think the federal government also needs to look into what I consider unlawful and outrageous behavior.
Richard says the experience has shaken his sense of trust.
It was a hoax, fully. It was a deception because they did promise me and to many of my countrymen, they promised work, changing the appointment, full hotel stay, that is, for 1 or 2 months.
California's Attorney General has asked for all records from the state of Florida pertaining to those migrant flights. He also says there's an ongoing criminal investigation to see if there was any wrongdoing connected to those flights. The Bexar County Sheriff also had a conversation with California's governor about the details of his investigation into a similar incident that happened in San Antonio in September of 2022. We asked Florida's Division of Emergency Management for clean copies of that tape that it produced regarding the migrants, this time with audio included that had been silenced before. We also have requested copies of the consent forms from the agency. We've also posed detailed questions to that agency as well as the Office of Florida's governor about the people who recruited those migrants for those flights. We have not yet heard replies to our requests for comment. As for Richard, he has since moved to a different city with his family. He says he had a lawyer change his immigration court appointment. John Mone, Scripps News, Houston.